Hey, well look at what we've got here, 2 games in 1. And the theme song is a ripoff of NBC's Roundball Rock. I mean, hey, what could go wrong? Plus, of course, it was made by some random game company that, you've never even heard of. So this is going to be good, right? Of course it's going to be good, right? We got the suit on, using a different camera, right? We're going to make this really professional. Hopefully, this doesn't overheat or, fall apart in front of me or something like that. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, today I've got another special thing for you, which is that I'm doing a collaboration. I am collaborating with myself. The reason why is obvious, right? Because this game is a football game and a baseball game together. So while this video technically belongs to the football channel, I'm going to try to get YouTube to show it to both audiences. We'll see if this works or not. I've never tried it before. This is, however, really a football video, and I'll explain to you why. You see, I've recently started a project where I've been playing through all football games that were released in 1993. I've been doing this for every system, and I've been doing it in kind of a haphazard order. I think that there's 25 of these games or so, ranging from the really good to the absolutely awful.
Gives it to the fullback. He fires it. Interception.
And it's been obvious for a while that some of these games are a lot better than others.
Interception.
And I've been making videos for each of these games as I played through them, at least for the most part I have been. There are a couple of videos I need to get caught up with and stuff like that. And there are a couple of games I've played for this video that I haven't really covered yet, so you'll get some surprises. Now, the reason why I chose 1993 out of all the possible years of football games and video games and stuff is because that's really the year the football video games started to catch fire. That year had something like 25 games, something like that. I'm trying to remember what my notes said. It's not like it is today where everybody just plays Madden and NCAA and they call that good. It was not like that back in those days. In fact, if you're an old guy like me, you remember what it was like in those days, right? There were tons of different football games. We had the good and the bad and the ugly. And as you guys know, I've spent a lot of time playing the old home video game console versions of these games. This is because I spent most of my time playing these games as a kid on the home consoles. But there were also really good portable football games that I've ignored up to this point. That's right, portable games, right? So this is back before you kids had your Switch, and it looked the same on the console as it did on the TV. Now, man, I'm talking Game Gear, I'm talking Atari Lynx, I'm talking the Game Boy, right? That's what we're talking about here. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the Game Boy. Now, I don't know how old you are. I don't know when you grew up. I don't know you, right? Hopefully you know something about me. If you're like my age or a little bit older, you probably remember the Game Boy pretty well, right? Remember Tetris, games like that, right? Game Boy was kind of the NES's younger brother. It was a portable video game system that could do almost everything that the NES could. Anyway, this is what the Game Boy looked like back in the good old days. This baby was pretty thick by modern standards, but it was still very portable. In fact, I can remember smuggling a Game Boy into school in my pants pocket back when I was 13. So, when I think back on those days, I'm guessing that I probably had really deep pockets. Everyone was sagging back then. It was the 90s and stuff like that. Anyway, the thing about the Game Boy is that it's not really as underpowered as you might think. It was an 8-bit system like the NES, not like 4-bit or whatever we called it on the playground. And it actually had more RAM and more video RAM on board than the NES system had. But it only had 4 shades of gray. Not 50, but just 4. Anyway, whatever. And it was designed in a way that made it seem really sluggish compared to the home consoles. Anyway, I got my first Game Boy for Christmas in 1992. I was 8 years old. It came with Super Mario Land 2, which was easily the hottest Game Boy game around. Though I don't remember exactly what the packaging looked like, I'm pretty sure it was something like this. Anyway, I played this game like crazy back when I was a kid. And even though it's been over 30 years since I last played it, I can assure you that this game still holds up today. This game is just as much fun today as it was back when I was a kid. and it's honestly impressive for a handheld game from 1992. Oh yeah, and by the way, big shout out to Mr. Matthews on YouTube, whose videos I really love to watch. I wish he would make them more often, right? Mr. Matthews has some of the best videos on the Game Boy games, like of all time, that I've ever seen. He's not really into sports games, which is common for you, like gaming YouTubers and all that stuff. But, you know, watch me if you want sports. Anyway, go check out Mr. Matthews if you're interested. I'll stick a link to him in the description of this video so you guys can check him out. So as cool as Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins was, I really wanted to play sports games on the Game Boy, right? Because I'm not one of these like gamer dorks. I actually do care about like sports and stuff like that. And so after a couple years, I did wind up getting a couple of Game Boy sports games. Most notably was the Game Boy version of Madden 95. And it was what it was. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, Madden 95 on the Game Boy is actually really, really impressive. There are some corny aspects like the sound when the ball is thrown or kicked in the air. This was kind of an odd decision. However, this really is a Madden game, and it plays just like the 16-bit versions, complete with some voice samples. In fact, the speed of this game measures up well against the Genesis version, at least in my opinion. And even though the crowd noise is really nothing but annoying static, the overall presentation value of this game is really impressive. So I kind of like Madden 95 these days. It's a better game than I remember it being. When I was a kid, though, I didn't really appreciate it that much. Now, I was always looking elsewhere, right? I was looking for some other game that I could take with me on the long car rides. So back then, right, I would play Mario Land 2, I would play Link's Awakening. I got that game new when it came out. But you can only beat those games so many times, right? I kept wondering if there wasn't some better sports game out there. In particular, I was curious about this Sports Illustrated 2-in-1 game. This was the sort of box I would stare at for hours at Shopko or Kmart or whatever. I always wondered how in the world they could fit 2 sports onto one little cart and if the games themselves were any good. Well, now I know what it is, and to be really honest with you guys up front, these games are not really that bad. They're not perfect, they're not great, right, but they're not that bad. The football game's not quite as good as some of the earlier Game Boy football games, and the baseball game does have its problems, but I have played games that are a lot worse than that, believe me. Anyway, let's go dig into this, and we're going to start off with football. Anyway, football is the first game listed on the title screen. Make sure that you choose a 15-minute game. I cannot imagine anybody playing this for a full hour. And you'll be pleased to discover that all of the 1993 NFL cities are here, even though the game doesn't have either the NFL or NFLPA license. So back in those days, it really was not such a big deal, actually. It wasn't really until like the PlayStation era that people started to care a lot about like, is the official license there and all that other stuff. Back in like the early 90s, the mid 90s, like, yeah, maybe some games had the license, maybe some games didn't. Usually you couldn't tell the difference because the players didn't look like who they were supposed to be anyway, right? It was mostly just a sticker that they stuck on the game box. And, you know, that's just the way it was. The game plays just like any other football video game. You can choose passes, runs, or kicks, but you should know that your play calls are generally pretty limited, and there doesn't seem to be any way you can influence whether a pass is like complete or not. Incomplete. It's pretty much a trial and error kind of game. And as you just noticed, the game also has voice samples, just like Madden 95. It's pretty cool, huh, for the Game Boy? There was this technique that programmers used back then to get these really crisp-sounding voice samples into Game Boy games, because if you listen to voice samples in NES games, you'll realize right away that it sounds a lot better on the Game Boy. But you will also notice when you play these games that when you get the really nice-sounding voices, like, the entire game will freeze. Now, the reason why is because, like, the whole CPU is playing this voice clip, so everything else has to freeze. It didn't have dedicated hardware to play back voice samples, and it definitely didn't have anything like, you know, that MIDI chip that the Genesis had. So again, Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Anyway, playing defense is a little bit more fun, I guess. Of course, since this is an American football game, you do have to worry about annoying things. I'm not sure where this holding call came from, but whatever. So that's common for the old football games, of course, right? They wanted to have a penalty system to make it like realistic, so they came up with one at random. It has nothing to do with what happened in your play. You know what game I like? I like Tecmo Super Bowl because there's no penalties in that game, right? Who wants to play a game with penalties? It's stupid. Anyway, overall, this is a pretty mid football game for the Game Boy. Not like mid bad, right? But it's kind of in the middle there somewhere. Anyway, even with the game set on the fastest game setting, it still took me over a half hour just to play a single game. By the time this game was just about over, I had gotten tired of trying and decided to screw around a little bit to see if I could get anything like bizarre to happen. To be honest though, this game is surprisingly well programmed, it feels like a football game, and it's actually kind of fun to play. We lost in the end, of course, but you know, the final stats were actually pretty good for a Game Boy football game. Anyway, just like I said, this football game is pretty mid. I would not say that this is one of the worst 8-bit football games I've ever played. It's not even close to that bad. I would say it's right about average. Now, if you want a better football game for the Game Boy, you should try Tecmo Bowl. That's right, Tecmo Bowl for the Game Boy. A lot of you are going to be mad at me for showing you this one. Yeah, they made a port of Tecmo Bowl for the Game Boy, and it's actually really good. This is basically the exact same as the original NES Tecmo Bowl game, except that the sound effects kind of suck. The game, however, is a ton of fun to play. And I think that this has the best halftime show in the history of football video games, by far, no questions asked. Now, this kind of halftime show, right? This is what Sports Illustrated should have had for its game, right? Because when you think of Sports Illustrated, right, like, what reason did you have to read Sports Illustrated? You know, when you were like 13 or 14, right? I mean, like, how did they leave this stuff out of the Sports Illustrated game? I mean, seriously, the halftime show in this game is nothing but stats. It's really boring and it's just a waste of time. Now, it's obvious that we were fans of Sports Illustrated back in the day because of all of its journalistic integrity. Now, we take our sports reporting seriously and we only accept the best quality journalism. Indeed, I, for one, can proudly say that I read these magazines for the articles. Anyway, Tecmo Bowl got it right once again, and Sports Illustrated got it wrong. But you know what? It's all good, right? After all, we've still got the baseball game to go through, so let's see how that one stacks up. Baseball, of course, is the other game on the menu. And the cool thing about this game is that you can choose the number of innings that you want to play. Anyway, I think that this has all 28 Major League Baseball teams. Now, it's kind of strange, at least for me, to think about playing a baseball game where you don't actually play all 9 innings, but whatever, right? So I wanted to play all 9 innings of this one, and I did, and it was an experience. Anyway, when you pitch, you've got this behind-the-shoulder camera, which is actually pretty cool. It's not quite as cool as something like Bases Loaded, but it's also not the worst that I've ever seen. Fielding is hard to get used to at first, but at least you can throw the ball quickly. You're always going to give up base hits since it's so hard to figure out who you're controlling. However, when you get used to how the system works, you can use tricks like this to get base runners in a pickle, and when this works, it's actually pretty satisfying. And the hitting in this game, honestly, isn't awful. It's like not that easy, and I'm not good at it, but it's not awful. Now, the biggest problem is figuring out how the timing works. That took me a while to really understand. You will likely strike out quite a bit when you first play this game. Once you start actually making contact, you'll find that the hardest thing is that the computer is really good at playing defense. But you'll figure out a way to get base hits after a little while. So honestly, this game would be the best type of game to play with 2 players, right? Now that means you need to have 2 Game Boys. You got to have like the link cartridge, or I'm sorry, the link thing that I think costs extra. You had to have the same copy of the same game, which like nobody ever had back in those days. So the whole thing kind of sucks, right? I mean, you look at how much money that costs and you're like, screw it, let's go play, like 2-player Tetris on the NES or something like that, right? But the problem when you play this game 1 player is that the computer is really, really good good at fielding, right? It's like perfect at fielding, and you will always suck because the fielding system of this game is really bad, right? It would be a lot easier to play this game and like it if there actually was, an auto fielding option, but if there is one, I can't find it. Anyway, when you get used to the fielding, you'll find that you can dive for balls. And when you miss them, you'll get this special screen that makes fun of you. Anyway, in the end, we lost by a pretty embarrassing margin. The final score was 18-0. We gave up 41 hits, and we couldn't score a single run despite getting 11 hits of our own. Most of those hits were singles, of course. Now, this is because the computer's really good at defense, and it's also because everybody throws like they're freaking Roberto Clemente. I mean, it's crazy the sort of throws you get in this game. But like I said, though, it's not like this is an awful game, right? We're not talking like MLB by LJN, right? Thanks. Yeah. We're not talking about like Roger Clemens MVP baseball on the NES. We're not talking Bo Jackson's whatever piece of garbage that was, right? We're not talking about that Quattro sports game that just deserves to die, right? No, this is like a mid baseball game, right? Just like that football game was mid, this baseball game would be like in the middle of the pack if it were an NES game. There are better Game Boy baseball games out there, and there are also worse Game Boy baseball games. Now, in my opinion, the Famicom series in Japan is the best of the Game Boy baseball series out there. Though it is a little bit slow, the first Famicom on the Game Boy is a ton of fun, and it feels just like the Famicom version. In fact, a lot of the tricks from the Famicom versions work here as well. It's a little bit easy once you figure out the right way to play, but it seriously is a ton of fun. Anyway, the exact same game was released as extra bases in North America, including the exact same team designations. They didn't even put in like fake major league teams like we got in RBI baseball. The player names are a kind of strange, but hey, who doesn't want a number 3 hitter named Mask? Anyway, that's the good of the Game Boy baseball games, and then there's the bad, and yeah, there's a lot of bad. For example, Nintendo came out with a Game Boy port of Ken Griffey Jr. Presents Major League Baseball back in 1998. So I had this game back then, I was in middle school, and this was one of the big disappointments of my childhood. I mean, the opening screens look like the real thing, yeah? But this game is way too complex for the Game Boy's hardware. Playing with manual fielding on is literally impossible. And playing with auto fielding on is really boring, even though I know this game has like the real player names and whatever. Honestly, this game is totally unplayable. This is one of the worst baseball games I've ever played. So, like I said, the Sports Illustrated game, or games, I guess I should say, like, this cartridge is right in the middle, right? The football game's not Tecmo, but it's not like LJN's NFL on the NES. Don't play that one if you haven't yet, guys. Just stay away. Do not do it, right? The Game Boy game is not quite Famicom, but it's a lot better than, like, the Super Nintendo ports that came out on the Game Boy, right? So it's right in the middle. Anyway, even though I suck at these games, these really are not all that bad. I mean, they're not great games, sure, but they could be a lot worse. I'll put it to you this way, both of these games are manageable enough that I could see myself playing them again at some point in time. And it's honestly really impressive that they were able to stick both sports together on such a small cartridge. So I guess all in all, this gives you an idea of what the Game Boy was capable of back in the day. Anyway, there you have it. Overall, this is pretty much a mid-game, right? My only complaint about this game is that the halftime show sucks.